Thank you everybody again for joining us. Good afternoon, and we hope you're staying safe and well. Today's webinar is going to help you create the essential tools that will set your project up for success. And Scott, if I could ask you to jump forward 2 slides there, that would be wonderful. Thank you very much. So today's webinar is brought to you by the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development, which partners with individuals and organizations to enhance performance and productivity through professional development programs, certificates, coaching, consulting, and assessments. Professional development programs are delivered on-site at the Fluno Center in beautiful downtown Madison, and we are now offering online programs facilitated by instructors with practical, real-world experience. The Center for Professional and Executive Development also partners with organizations throughout the country to provide customized on-site and online professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. For more information on the Center for Professional and Executive Development, please visit our website at uwcped.org. If you have questions you'd like to ask during today's session, you can submit those using the questions box from the sidebar, and you can expand and collapse that sidebar using the orange arrow you'll see on your screen. We'll pose questions that are submitted during a Q&A at the end of today's webinar. And now I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Scott Converse. Scott is an instructor and program director for the Center for Professional and Executive Development. For more than 2 decades, Scott has developed and delivered programs in his areas of expertise, which include project management, project portfolio management, business requirements gathering, process improvement using Lean Six Sigma, business statistics, and decision-making. He also has more than a decade of applied experience in the field as a former information technology director and as a technologist for an internetworking software developer. Scott has developed and delivered programs for a variety of audiences ranging from novices to experienced professionals, and has worked with over a dozen other instructors in developing the phase-based and agile project management programs and certifications at CPED. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, John, for beaming me in. I'm super excited to be here with everybody. I want to make sure my little Telestrator pen works good. And I'm really glad that the platform that you've got set up for us allows for that type of question and comments back and forth. It's, I think, going to make for some interactive discussion at the end when we do a Q&A. And so, you know, before we begin, I probably should answer the question that many of you out there have, and it's a question that's been asked a lot during this crazy pandemic period. So, so let me just answer it right away. The answer is no pants. Let me be clear. Below the video line here, I've got board shorts and flip-flops on. If everything goes well, if this isn't a spectacular, colossal failure, later this evening, I'll be out on the water doing a little stand-up paddle boarding. So, so here's what I'm hoping for. As you submit questions and comments, go ahead and submit to John your favorite or your unique below the video attire, and best dressed wins the competition at the end of the event. Here's what I'd really like to do though. I want to spend some time with you to cover 5 important tools that I found that in the over 2 decades of experience as a practitioner and delivering hundreds of these programs that seem to help give project managers, project team leaders, and organizations more successful project outcomes. The 5 tools we're going to share with you at the end. You'll get template versions of each of the tools, plus access to all sorts of other information and materials that are going to help you to be more successful. So with that said, let's buckle up. There's a lot of stuff to cover in a short period of time, and we'll plow forward. Here we go. I know we got a mixed audience of seasoned professionals and folks that are relatively new to the field of leading and successful project outcomes. So what I thought I'd do is start with a couple of basics, knowing that these basics are really going to help us better understand why I chose the tools that we'll be looking at during this meeting. And And I wanted to start with the term project because one of the problems that we run into is that the term project is such a cliche word now that's used everywhere. You know, this weekend I've got a couple of projects that I'm working on. Do you really? Or are you just describing tasks that you'll be working on? Projects should be unique. They should have a beginning and an end. They're temporary endeavors. So when I hear folks talking about repeated work activities that happen over and over and over again and calling them projects, technically they're talking about a process. Processes repeat, projects are unique. And because of that uniqueness, there's a level of uncertainty and there's much more complexity in project-driven work. A project should create some sort of solution, some sort of product, service, successful event completion. There's something that you're building to try to create a successful outcome. And here's the thing, because it's unique and there is a level of uncertainty, during the early kickoff phase of projects, it's going to be really important for us to understand what that something is, because that product, that solution that you know is built, that you have a clear understanding of, not all of the other stakeholders across the organization and across your end users or your customers know exactly what that is. So we need to make sure that we get that clear. Um, Projects differ in complexity, and I like the way that it's described here as t-shirt sizes. Actually, that's a best practice. Some organizations, when they initiate or kick off projects, they'll describe the level of complexity as t-shirt sizes or as dog sizes. You know, everything from Chihuahua simple to Great Dane very complex. And where I'm going with this complexity thing is that the more complex this unique initiative is that's creating some sort of thing of value, some sort of solution at the end, the more complex it is, the more we're going to need to use some of these project management tools and templates to help us communicate to other stakeholders that are affected what this thing is. The less complex it is, the less we're going to need to use these tools. And so I just want to make sure everybody's kind of clear with me here. You're not always going to use every one of the tools that I describe, and in some cases, you're going to use far more than just the basics that I give you today. So let's take a look at some other things related to the uniqueness of projects. So there are two big project management methodologies. If most of you are familiar with the terms waterfall, I'm just going to I'll put the acronym waterfall down, or phase-based project management. And then another real popular approach at getting successful project outcomes is agile. And we did a great 10-minute introductory video on the differences between waterfall and agile done by my colleague Helen. And I really encourage you to take a look at that if you haven't had a chance or if the concepts are new to you. But here's the thing, both waterfall and agile, they both have an initiation phase. And so I'm going to be looking at tools that satisfy the needs to help you see successful project outcomes, whether you're in a waterfall project or in an agile project, because they both have initiation phases. Now, what we're looking at here is just a visual of what your traditional phase-based waterfall project management approach would look like, where you initiate the project, you know, you start here, you then begin to plan out the work that needs to be completed, then execute and control for changes, and eventually close. That's the phase-based approach, and initiation can clearly be seen right here. You got an arrow, it says initiation. For Agile, it's a little bit more vague. I know many of you in Agile environments are familiar with this visual that describes the common work activities that happen in an Agile and Scrum environment. But when you hear folks talking about Sprint Zero or developing the product roadmap, those are also initiation activities. Agile projects also have an initiation phase. And so the 5 tools that I chose are tools that you'll use in the initiation phase of any type of project that you work on. The goal of the 5 tools is to be able to answer this really simple but really important question. And I'm going to try to be dramatic here to make sure that this is emphasized. This is maybe the most important question that you can ask at the kickoff of a project. And the question is a two-parter. It is, what does done look like to our most important stakeholders? By what I mean by done, what are the jobs that this solution that you're hoping to get implemented successfully, what are the jobs that need to be performed? What are the measurable outcomes that you hope to see from this project initiative, from this unique one-time event with levels of complexity? And what does done look like to not me, the project manager, not me, team members on the project, but what does done look like to our most important stakeholders? We want to build these solutions to satisfy the needs of our most important stakeholders. And so these initiation tools that I'm about to give you should help answer that question. What does done look like, and who are our most important stakeholders? The tools I give you though are just the beginning. You know, you initiate projects first, and then there's a whole bunch of other things that you do to see a successful project outcome. I guess what I'm saying is it's not just these 5 tools that get you to project success. There's, after understanding what the done condition is and understanding who your most important stakeholders are, you're going to need to plan out that work, estimate, schedule, sequence, build, test, deploy, close, deal with conflict. There's a lot of other things that happen, but it all starts with initiation. And here they are. 5 tools plus one big activity that we'll perform at the end. I want to take a little look at project charters, a very popular and sometimes misused tool at the beginning of project-driven work. I'd like to take some time to provide you with a constraints matrix, a tool that helps understand organizational constraints, and a tool that I use when I'm working with sponsors quite frequently. We'll spend some time on the stakeholder communication plan. Very commonly used tool in larger scale projects, but again, frequently misused or not including some of the important questions that need to be asked inside that communication plan. So we'll take a look at that. I want to share with you a I don't want to call it a tool, but it's a vault, a repository of interview questions that you can use to unearth what your end user needs are. These are requirements gathering interview questions that I use on my own projects that I want to make available to you. And then we'll spend just a little bit of time going over roles and responsibilities that your team members may be vague about, and how you can create some clarity at the beginning of the project around roles and responsibilities. So let's dive into each of the 5 next. So project charters. Look, every project management curriculum, whether it's agile or whether it's phase-based process improvement, I don't care where you're at, what you do related to projects, project charters are a tool that get discussed. And if you do a charter well, there are some things that it should help answer. There are some things that it should share with the rest of the organization. And one really important one, I'm going to start right now, is that it should explain that this unique endeavor is big enough and important enough that the organization needs to release resources to make it a success, that the organization is releasing people time and resources and dollars to help build this solution. A project charter is a formal release for dollars and time. There's some other things though that a charter should do well. If the template you use is crafted well and the discussions used to work through that template are done correctly, you should have a roadmap for how you're going to get to done, or how you're going to get to a completed successful project. Remember, projects are temporary endeavors. They shouldn't last forever, and your project charter should give a glimpse as to how we're eventually going to close this thing and be able to move on to new initiatives. They should also summarize, a project charter should summarize the the information that you and your team collect in the initiation phase. You know, those important jobs that need to be performed, high level business requirements or deliverables of the solution, measurable outcomes, or the success criteria that's needed to create the done condition. And look, for sure, we want to know which voices are the most important in decision making. Not only who are the end users that we're building the solution for, but when we run into conflicts where one group needs one thing and another group needs a different feature or capability, how are we going to break ties? How is decision making going to occur? A charter should do that. A charter also is frequently used to do these things, to prevent rogue requests from entering our project pipeline. It's sometimes a gate checking tool. You know, we put charters up in front of our project pipeline to prevent well-intended individuals who might have influence in the organization from just treating anything that they find important as a project. It's a block to make sure that only the most important things are being worked on in project-driven work. It's used sometimes as a communication tool, both for internal stakeholders like the team and the sponsor, but we'll use a charter sometimes for external stakeholder communication. And it's a placeholder document that's used when the organization goes through its mission, vision, strategic objectives, and then all of the projects that support those strategic objectives. It's a project identification, selection, and placeholder tool. Oh my gosh, charters are used for everything. And that's sometimes what the problem is. We over the years have started to over-engineer these charter documents to be a repository of the answers to all things. In the end, here's what a charter should do. It should create alignment. It should make sure that the team leader, and the sponsor are all clear about what the done condition is and who the most important stakeholders are. If your charter template does that, you've got yourself a good charter template. And then you'll be communicating and having great discussions that help lead to more successful project outcomes. That alignment is one of the most important things that we're trying to do at the beginning of a project. But here's the thing. If project charters are given to us at the beginning, when do we know the least about what the done condition is? When do we know the least about who our most important stakeholders are? When do we know the least about what all of the features, fit, and capabilities should be? When do we know the least about constraints and how we're going to deal with technology and the learning curve that will always happen in some sort of an event like a project that's unique? If charters are given to us at the beginning on day one, they're at best a guess as to how we're going to make this work. So all project charters should be updated. The thing that you're given on day one, I don't call that a project charter. I call that a draft project charter. Now, I'm not saying that you should not be given a charter on day one, but you will have to update this thing over time. And by the end of the initiation phase, you should have an updated charter that provides the team, the sponsor, and other key decision makers with an understanding of what the done condition is, how we're going to get to the done condition, and who our most important stakeholders are. And this iterative updating, these feedback loops that we build in so that we can understand better what needs to be created, these changes that eventually happen to our updated charter, they have to be agreed upon. You can't just make a willy-nilly change to a charter because in many cases, the charter describes the scope of this initiative. If a change to a charter occurs, I want to make sure that my team is in complete understanding. I want to make sure that the sponsor is in complete understanding. And we should track those changes because that'll help us understand the evolution of this project, how scope has changed over time. charters change. So I know this is a bit of an eye chart. I'm not expecting you to be able to read this in great detail. This is one of the 5 templates that you'll be receiving. It's a two-page charter document in which all of the fields are described in red, and some tips on how to fill out that charter are provided for you. I use it frequently for my small, medium, and I would call them not quite large, small to medium-sized projects. This is a great charter template to use. For large and extra large projects or XXL projects, I'm probably going to need a charter template that's a little bit more robust. Here's where I'm going with this. Most organizations have multiple charter templates available, and that's a best practice. You don't always want to have the same charter for all types of projects. You may elect to have different types of charters for your phase-based or your process improvement projects, different from your agile projects. You're definitely going to have different different levels of complexity in your charter if it's a small to medium-sized project versus an XXL project. Different charters are okay, but then make sure that everybody in the organization knows which type of charter they should use for which type of project initiative. Um, so we'll look more at this two-page project charter template towards the end of the initiation toolkit. Here are some additional examples of project charters. Again, Agile, hard to see back here, but this was an example of a continuous improvement project charter. Sometimes we call them an A3 form. This project charter was the beginning of a 3-page document that's part of our uh, 3-day detailed course in phase-based project management, planning, scheduling, control, different charters for different types of projects. Another tool that I want to make sure that you get, besides the project charter, is something I call a constraints matrix. And here's what it's about. All projects, because of this complexity and because of this uniqueness, there are organizational constraints that you, as the project team leader or the project manager, need to be able to balance. All organizations have constraints. We don't have unlimited dollars, unlimited time, unlimited ability to meet the needs of our most important stakeholders. And I, as the project manager, project team leader, I want to understand what constraints are going to be limiting factors as my team and I explore what the done condition is and who those most important stakeholders are. The classic constraints model, I'm going to share with you 3 of them right now, but the classic one is called the triple constraints of project management, where the job of the project manager is to understand what are the cost or budget constraints, what are the schedule or time constraints of the organization, what are the scope of feature constraints that you build into the solution, and how do you balance those big constraints to create satisfied customers, happy end users? Sometimes it's described this way. Do you want it fast? Do you want it cheap? Do you want it good? Pick 2. And I think it's humorous, but a little bit truthful in the way that that's described, that your job as a project manager is not to optimize all of these constraints. Your job is to balance them. You have to have some flexibility in one of the constraints. I can see success, I can lead teams to successful project outcomes if I'm told it has to be done inexpensively, so there's a cost constraint, and that it also has to be done quickly. We can build solutions that are done cheaply, cost effectively, and in a short time horizon. We just can't have all of the features and capabilities that might be part of a perfect done condition. We have to be able to balance. And here's what I want to know at the beginning of a project during the initiation phase. I want to know which constraint is most important, which constraint is fixed, and which constraints do I have some flexibility over. I don't ask this of the team. I ask an important stakeholder that's a critical stakeholder that we want to create alignment around. I ask the sponsor about these constraints. The sponsor is the person or group of people that have influence over the checkbook. Now, there are lots of other considerations for being a sponsor and a good sponsor, but at the end of the day, follow the money. That's who your sponsor is, and I want their view of what are the constraints. Oh, I want to know what their feelings are about what the done condition is. I'd like to know what they think should be in fit and function and capability. But really, I'm probing the sponsor over constraints. And the tool that I use, well, a tool is called a constraints. The tool is a constraints matrix, and it's going to explore schedule, budget, scope of features. But it will also take a look at risk, uh, resources available, and the quality threshold levels that we're trying to meet or exceed with the solution. Here's what it looks like. It's just a it's just a simple grid in which I ask the biggies: schedule, budget, scope of features, and I ask the sponsor the following question. So in a conversation that I have with the sponsor, I ask, tell me which of the three biggies of the triple constraints are not flexible, they're fixed. Which of the three are fixed, but we have a little bit of flexibility. I'll probably have to go through some approval channels if I need to make changes to the done condition or if I exceed the thresholds that you set for me for this fixed constraint. And which of the constraints are completely adjustable, are open to me. I can flex and modify. I don't need to go through any sort of decision tree for that. And in almost every one of these meetings that I have with sponsors, here's how the conversation goes. I show the constraints matrix to them. I have a series of probing questions that I want to use to help flesh out these fields, and the conversation always goes the same way. I show them the matrix. I say which of these constraints are fixed, and they go, "Oh, this will be a valuable meeting, Scott. For this project, it's fixed schedule, fixed budget, and we are fixed on all of the capabilities and features. Great meeting. Good luck seeing a successful outcome." And I remind the sponsor that this is a conversation in which the tool isn't a checkbox tool. It's an actual grid where real text can be put down. And so then I start to ask probing questions around schedule, budget, and scope of features to understand why they made them so fixed to begin with. And during that conversation, what typically evolves is that, well, at first, the assumption was all are fixed. We frequently see one of the three that does have a little bit of flexibility. The goal of a constraints matrix by the end of that conversation is to identify which of the big three do I have some flexibility. I'm also probing those other constraints around quality, resources, and risk as well. And to help with the constraints matrix discussion, included in the template are a series of probing questions that you might want to ask. Now, for example, if budget is deemed as being the fixed constraint, some of the probing questions that I'm going to ask the sponsor were, well, how is this budget determined? What do we have other projects that we used in determining that budget? Because if so, I want to reach out to those other project managers and understand how they came up with the budget and what should I be considering when I'm building my budget for this particular project. I want to ask, if the budget is fixed, did you already have a list of features or capabilities that were built into that budget that was created? Because if so, that's going to help me understand the done condition. And if not, it's helping me understand that the budget maybe is just an estimate. It's maybe not a reflection of reality. Or maybe the budget is a reflection of reality, but the features that we have are going to have to be limited to fit that particular budget. And I always ask this question. I understand if it's fixed, I'm going to try to hit it. But if crazy unusual events happen and we were to exceed the budget, what happens? Do I get a cardboard box and pack my belongings because I'm out of here? Or is it a case where we have to stop the project altogether? Or do we place the project on hold and have to look for other funding sources, which may put a delay on the project? Or if we exceed the budget, do we have to go back to those important stakeholders and ask them to pony up a little bit more for all of the new features that they are asking for in the done condition? I have probing questions for each of the constraints in that constraints matrix, and it allows you to have a short, quick conversation with the sponsor around what's most important from an organizational perspective. The constraints matrix isn't really used to help us understand fit and features. It's really meant to help us understand organizational constraints. So we've covered the charter. We've covered the constraints matrix. I've probably had conversations with my team members about what their version of done looks like. You know, they're an important stakeholder. I've talked to the sponsor and what their version of done is, but I also need to know who are the other important stakeholders. The tool that I'm going to share with you is called a stakeholder communication plan. But before we actually fill out that tool, we do some stakeholder identification and prioritization. We create a big list. We create a big list of stakeholders to begin with. Not that we're going to put every one of those stakeholders in the final communication plan. No, we're going to take the big list and we're going to vet it down to our most important stakeholders. And a set of tools that I sometimes use are these generic stakeholder models. I've got a couple in here, and they're also attached in the stakeholder communication plan. And they help us create that big list that then gets narrowed down. In the end, though, what we'll have after our teams discussed, worked with the sponsor and the team has discussed who are the most important stakeholders, we'll have a list of those most important stakeholders in this spreadsheet. In this communication plan spreadsheet, I'll ask my team for these most important stakeholders. They're going to help us with decision making. They're going to help us understand what the done condition is. They're going to need to know some information about this project. And in this communication plan, I have a series of questions that I first ask the team to hypothesize on. Pretend you're each of these stakeholders and answer the questions as if you were that stakeholder in terms of what information is needed to help with decision making and to help better understand the done condition. And then I'm going to take this stakeholder communication plan and I'm going to meet up with those key important stakeholders. And the first question I'm going to ask them, even before I ask them what the done condition is, I'm going to call them out and say, hey, you're one of the most important stakeholders. You're going to help us with decision making. Your feedback on what the done condition is critically important. You're going to paint a picture of done that is much closer to what actually gets built than just about any other group. What information do you need from us, the project team, to help with this decision making? Some of the questions that I ask my team to hypothesize on and then I validate with the actual stakeholder is, what's the info that you need? I also ask, when will you need this information? How often should we share this information with you? What's the medium that we should use to share this information? Uh, I also ask this one, how do we know that you understand the information that was just shared with you? You know, it's one thing to push meeting minutes or to push the a project completed project charter. It's one thing to push information to stakeholders. It's another to make sure that they actually understand how this information should be used for decision making. But the most important thing for any stakeholder communication plan, I'm going to star this. I'm going to zoom in on it, and I think I can zoom. Yep, there we go. I'm going to zoom in on it because I want to know. I'm going to ask each of these important stakeholders when I meet up with them to ask them questions about the done condition. I'm going to ask them also, what happens What do we do if we run into issues in trying to create your version of done? What if we run into roadblocks or pitfalls or snags or landmines? What if the stuff that you're looking to see in the solution can't be created? How should I communicate to you? And in almost every case, here's what they say: Scott, come and see me directly. Don't bury it in an email. Don't stick it out on some web archive site with a link that describes that I might not get what I'm looking for. Come see me directly, shake me, and tell me how this is going to affect me and my group. I want to have a conversation in a meeting with you. After I've asked that question about communication, I then ask this: if conflict is going to happen in this project, if your version of done might not get reached because we have to satisfy some other group's version of done, if there's conflict between these important stakeholder groups, how do we address it? I want my stakeholder communication plans to be a conflict resolution document before there's any conflict. I want to get that laid out. What are the rules of engagement up front? The goal of a good communication plan should help make sure that we're sharing the right information and help us to manage conflict. Another tool I'm going to give you are some interview questions that help you unearth what are those important jobs and outcomes in the done condition. I want to highlight this though. It's about interviews. Surveys are a really important tool. I use surveys as a follow-up to interviews, but we always do interviews first. Interviews are a quicker and more effective way of increasing the knowledge level. I'm looking at my video screen right now, increasing the knowledge level of the team. Um, we need to have a conversation. Now, it doesn't have to necessarily be face-to-face, but surveys are not that. Surveys do not allow you to drill down, clarify for deeper meaning. I want to have a conversation around what the done condition is. And I'm typically going to go where their work is being performed. That could be where the end user or customer is. That could be where your business units are located. In the world of process improvement, continuous improvement, we talk about go to where the work is being performed, go to the Gemba. And what I'll bring during these requirements gathering interviews is I will bring the communication plan. We talked about that. I'll share with them, you're an important stakeholder. Let's walk through this, make sure that as we move forward in this project, we're clear about conflict and conflict resolution. I'll bring a set of questions for the interview. I'll also bring pictures. This could be process maps, data flow diagrams, or other visuals to help me describe. Could be storyboard mock-ups. It could be wireframes of what the eventual solution is, or what we think the eventual solution is. I want to bring pictures with me, and I'll bring something to record the results. Ideally, another human. Be careful if you're bringing digital recording devices like audio video recorders. Some organizations, that is an activity that is restricted, so be careful in the way that you record the results. But we definitely will have this interview and record the results, so possibly as taking notes, so that our other team members can be enlightened into what that stakeholder's needs were. And to help with the development of the questions, I've got a spreadsheet that you'll all be receiving that is a list of over 200 questions that I typically use on my types of project work. I broke it down into 15 topical areas that are listed here. Each worksheet in the Excel workbook contains a set of questions around these 15 topic areas. For example, I guess not, but yeah, in the spreadsheet, I've got some pictures, or I've got questions across each one of these different category types. And you can sift through, pick and choose the questions that make the most sense for the type of project initiative that you're working on. When I ask these questions, I'm looking for something that helps me to describe the done condition. We call it a requirement. And a good requirement should do one of these things. It should describe a scenario, or describe how we're going to measure for success, or show a quality level that we have to meet or exceed, or a particular fit, feature, function of the new future state system. It could be any of these visuals, and I'll actually take that visual with me and set it beside me as I'm doing the interview so that I know when I've unearthed one of these important business requirements. The requirements that I then write down and use in my project charter and in all of the downstream planning and executing of the project work, I try to stay away from the more formalized the system shall, the system must statements. I'm not I'm not saying that those technical, functional, and non-functional business requirements documents aren't valuable. They are to some, but for most of the stakeholders that I'm working with, I want it written down as a job statement. What is this thing? What type of job are we creating for a group of people? Or how are we making the job easier? How are we making the job more efficient? How are we reducing the errors that might happen from this job? Or I'm writing the requirement down as a measurable outcome, a way to show that if we've built the system correctly, if if we built the system correctly, it's going to meet or exceed that particular requirement need. Or sometimes it's just a general success criteria statement. And the way that I write them down is I will frequently use little format cards that are just fill in the blanks like this, where it's as a blank, where blank is the name of the stakeholder. I need blank, which is a description of the requirement or feature, job or outcome for the benefit of blank. What type of business value is being created by having this feature, requirement, job or outcome in place? Little note cards that look just like this. And for some of you out there who work in mixed environments or in agile environments, you know what this little note card is called. It's called a user story. So these requirements don't have to be super sophisticated, but they should help us to describe what the done condition is. As we're going through these initiation activities, I frequently see team members who become a little confused over their role or the level of responsibility that they have for the successful project outcome. Project team members to me are one of the most important stakeholders that are part of that grouping of folks that have important voices in the eventual outcome of the solution. Their version of done is important to me, and right away at project kickoff, I'm going to ask them, tell me what you think done should look like. Tell me who you think some of the other important stakeholders are. These team members often are chosen because they reflect different work groups. You know, they are representatives of different work groups, and so that's good to know and important. But project team members are frequently volunteers, and because of that, there is sometimes a misinterpretation over the amount of effort or time or needs that I have of them to complete project work assignments. And so I want to make sure that early in the initiation phase, my team members are clear about what their level of involvement is. Are they here just to provide some feedback about the done condition and then they're off and never to be seen again? Or are they also going to be involved not just with initiation activities, but the planning of the work, and then the working of the plan, and then working that plan all the way to close? I want to get an understanding of what their time commitments are, and I want to make sure that all of my team members understand how decision making is going to work if we run into conflicts or issues related to issues related to work products and getting them done in a timely manner. Sometimes this is just done through an informal conversation, especially if the team size is small or the project has low levels of uncertainty. We've done this type of project before. I can just have a short conversation around these roles and responsibilities. But when I'm working on my bigger projects, my large and XL and double XL size projects, and I have many team members, some of which who are inserted and then being removed, and others who think that they're just a borrowed resource, they're not in it for the long haul. I want to create a more formalized way of understanding those roles and responsibilities. I use a tool called a RACI matrix. And RACI stands for the 4 different roles that team members may play. They could be responsible, accountable, consulted, or informed. And let me show you what that looks like in the next page. So this is an example of a filled in RACI document. In advance of this discussion around roles and responsibilities, I'll fill one of these out as the project team leader. And the row values, they represent key milestones of the project. Things we're going to need to do to get to a successful close in this project. The column values are key internal stakeholders, folks that are responsible for, well, folks that are involved in helping to build this solution. So I'll call them internal stakeholders. And each of these internal stakeholders lined up against each of these milestones will be assigned one of 4 values. If you're the responsible party, the R, you're doing that work. You're the person doing the work. If you are the accountable party, you're not doing the work, you're approving the work. I actually typically replace the word accountable with approver. You are making sure that the work products that were created by the person who was responsible to complete the work, you're making sure that it meets or exceeds the quality levels that we strive for in the organization. You're a consulted, your role and responsibility as a consulted party is when you're not doing the work, you're too busy with other things. You're not approving the work either, but you have done this work before, and it would make sense for the responsible parties and the project team to get your feedback because you know what works and what doesn't work for this particular milestone activity. You're not doing that milestone activity, you're just giving us advice. You're an advisor, you're consulted. And finally, an informed stakeholder on a RACI chart. They're not doing the work, they're not approving the work. They've probably never done this type of work before, so it doesn't make sense to ask them for consultative advisory feedback. They're an informed party. It's important that for this transition from a way that we didn't have this solution in place, transitioning to a future state where this solution is now in place, it's important to share information so that they can feel comfortable in that transition from current state to future state. We call them informed parties. And I will lay out a RACI chart in advance, and then I will share it with my team. And then I ask the question, what did I get right and wrong? Is this the same view that you have on this project? And the follow-up conversation is what's important. The grid itself, not so important. The follow-up conversation, critical. An example of a cleaned up one that'll be part of your template tool pack included right here. And when do I use these 5 tools? Well, just the use of the tools, filling them out, helps increase the knowledge level of the team. But then I want that knowledge to be shared across the organization, especially to key decision makers. This includes the sponsor, but it could include other key decision makers within the organization. Could be business unit representatives. It could be some of those stakeholders that were on our most important list. And it's an opportunity to provide feedback. A Tollgate review meeting is not like a status meeting. Status meetings, tell me what you did, tell me what you're about to do. A Tollgate review is a short meeting, typically with the project manager, the sponsor, and maybe some key other decision makers. And what we're trying to determine is, should we continue forward with a go, a thumbs up, or should we put a pause on this project, or not move forward until we've cleaned up some things that we're still uncertain about? It's a go, no go style decision. And it provides an opportunity for sponsors and decision makers to provide feedback on progress. It gives the team the ability to provide feedback on how they're moving. And I schedule this at the end of each phase. Now, for phase-based project management, that's at the end of the initiate phase, that's at the end of the planning phase, and so on. For Agile, this is typically done at the end of your sprint reviews and your retrospectives. It's an opportunity to provide feedback on whether we should continue to move forward or not. And here's what I'll bring to one of those Tollgate reviews. I bring the templates that we've just got done talking about. I bring my charter and any updates that I'm proposing so that the sponsors and key decision makers can see and agree upon that before the end of that meeting. I bring at the end of the initiation phase, the Tollgate review for initiation, I bring that constraints matrix, make sure everybody's on the same page for what's fixed and what's flexible. I bring those descriptions of what done looks like, these requirements or needs, the job statements and outcomes. I also bring what the roadmap is going to look like next. Our team has gotten done with Initiate. Here's what the next steps look like to see this for the successful project outcome. There are a ton of other tools that we could explore in the initiation phase. We're not. They're all good. Things from product backlogs, critical to quality documents. I love my data flow diagrams, and we briefly touched on user stories. There's a bunch of other initiation tools that you could consider using. You're not always going to use them. It's just going to depend upon the complexity of your project. And with initiation completed, after that Tollgate review is done, we'll now then begin to plan out the work, figure out the tasks that need to be assigned and who we can assign them to. Then we're going to work that plan. We'll take that updated, refined and detailed project plan, and we'll work through it, resolving conflicts as they occur. And eventually, that'll lead us to close, where we create that successful project outcome. Initiate is just the beginning. There are other tools and activities that we need to perform to see that successful outcome. But initiate is always the first thing that we do. Woo, John, that was a lot in a very short period of time. I hope folks still made it through. I'm curious, what types of questions and feedback are you getting through the chat lines?
Yeah, thank you, Scott. We got a lot of good questions coming in through the questions box. And if anybody has any other questions, feel free to submit them. Scott, I'll pose some of these to you now. One of them that we received was whether you had any best strategies that you could share about responding to concerns from sponsors and other stakeholders about how much time and effort it takes to create some of those project artifacts, and a feeling that they might be too costly in terms of both effort and time.
Right, right. Again, this is a great question that's related to the complexity of your project. If I'm working on a project that is small, not XXL, but small, I'm probably not even using all of these template tools that I just described, and the time that I'm going to spend on them is much less than if this is an elaborate project that's going to require the orchestration of dozens of important stakeholders across many months or maybe many years, and dollar sizes that are very, very large. But for a small to medium-sized project, one of the things that I do is I time box the amount of effort that the team and the project manager will spend on using these tools. Like, for example, that project charter template that I shared with you earlier for small to medium-sized projects, if I was given a blank charter to build from scratch with my team for a small to medium-sized project, I tell the team this should take us 60 minutes or less. I make sure that we spend 1 hour or less on this chartering exercise. And here's the reason why. These templates are not fixed in stone documents. We're not trying to create perfect artifacts. the artifacts are used to help increase our knowledge level. And as new knowledge is exposed, both in initiate, plan, execute, and throughout the lifespan of the project, as our knowledge level increases, we're going to have to go back and update some of these documents. So I don't want the team to try to create perfect, I don't want the team to create perfection. I often kick off these exercises by saying, our goal is to get a very good project outcome. Perfection will be our enemy in trying to get to a very good outcome that is done on time. So time box the amount of effort and work that you spend on each one of these templates, and consider how many of the templates you actually need to use depending upon the complexity of your project. You'll use a lot more of them for large, you'll use far fewer of them for small. Yeah, that's a great one.
Great, thank you, Scott. Again, a lot of good questions coming in. I think we have time for one more here. So Scott, we have an individual who said they work on process improvement projects, and
Yeah.
they're wondering if there's a different set of tools and initiation tools that you use in process improvement project work versus waterfall and agile projects.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't really give too much love to our process improvement folks. A process improvement project is a type of project, and it's a little bit different. In a process improvement project, we aren't starting with a solution. We don't start with solutions. We start with business problems, performance problems. And our goal in a process improvement project is to understand this performance problem, determine what is the level of performance in current state, and then move to a future state in which we've reduced the root causes that are creating that performance problem. A process improvement project has a lot more data-driven investigation upfront because we don't know what the solution is. We don't yet know what the real root causes are. So to start on day one and say, these are the solutions that should get implemented in future state, it would be detrimental because that solution may not address a real root cause. So there's a lot of data-driven problem solving that takes place. Let me show you what I mean. I've got a little example right here. I'm going to zoom in to make it a little bit easier. So if you're doing data-driven problem solving in a Lean Six Sigma or DMAIC way, the very first step is to do things like confirming the charter and understand customer needs. Well, this is your initiation phase. The tools we just described would be used right in the upfront defined phase of a DMAIC style project. Some of you, though, that don't do DMAIC style process improvement, that do more of a lean thinking approach, where you're running Kaizen style events, you've got a preparation, execution, and follow-up phase. And typically these initiation tools that I just described to you, they happen in the preparation phase before you bring the team together to do your process walks, before you bring your team together to identify wastes and begin to plan a future state. So typically these initiation tools are done in the prep phase for a Kaizen style event. What else?
Well, great. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. We, again, had a lot of good questions come through. I think, unfortunately, we're running out of time here. So I think we'll have to move forward with getting things wrapped up. But thank you
What
again
was
for.
the most unique outfit, John?
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great question. So we had somebody that said they're wearing Darth Vader ankle socks, and I think that wins
Hey,
the day. Yep, couldn't get a picture, unfortunately,
that's all
using the
right.
tool we have, but they expressed the desire to share that otherwise.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes, some good ones. So thank you again, Scott. Appreciate it. If I could ask you to move to the next slide, they're perfect. So the project initiation tools that Scott discussed today can all be explored further and in much greater depth in project management, planning, scheduling, and control. This is a fully online program, and it gives you access to the tools to assess and improve your project management system, manage scope change, and understand the roles and responsibilities of a successful project manager. The next session of this program begins June 9th. If you'd like more information or to register for the program, you can visit go.wisc.edu/CPED-PMPSCO or check out the website at uwcped.org. We also invite you to join us on May 28th to learn how to use agile project management methodologies to create rapid value for your organization. Instructor Sean Belling will teach you how to ensure credibility for your project team, which creates opportunities to request and deliver more value-creating projects. You can sign up for Sean's webinar by going to go.wisc.edu/cped-agile528. So again, thank you all for attending the webinar today. We hope you're able to implement some of these techniques in your next project, and stay well. And we hope to see you at one of our upcoming webinars and online programs. And thank you again, Scott.
Thank you.